Welcome to AP World History. We'll be looking at Chapter 10. We'll be looking primarily at Western Europe and examining the Dark Ages there, the feudal period, um, the Black Death, the Plague, the Hundred Years' War, Charlemagne. So there's quite a bit of things that we're going to look at. We're also going to look at the influence of the Church, the Catholic Church. This shows the period of the Middle Ages, starting from 500 to 1500 CE. As Rome's influence is diminished, Western Europe will fall into what they call the Dark Ages, where progress pretty much comes to a standstill. As Rome is collapsing, barbarians are beating at their door. One of the reasons that the barbarians took an interest in the Roman Empire, basically, the Romans hired barbarians as mercenaries. They got a chance to see what was going on, and they could see that the Roman Empire was weakening, and they will try to take their share. There's a variety of groups who will move in to the western part of the Roman Empire: the Gauls, the Visigoths, the Vandals, the Saxons, just a whole host of people exerting their rights, their power in this area. This map shows some of the routes of the invaders, the Huns. We talked about those in the Byzantine Empire. And these groups are just going to carve up Western Europe. And they don't bring too much with them in terms of culture and learning and those kinds of things, which explains why this area slips into what they call the Dark Ages. It's constant warfare. The only thing that really holds it together is the Catholic Church. But progress pretty much comes to a standstill. As far as people reading and writing, there weren't too many people who could do that. Primarily, you found the upper crust, the elites in different areas in Western Europe, the monks. The church really was the place where learning was preserved, not necessarily advanced. This shows a map of the upheaval in Europe, looking at the different wars, the changing of boundaries, one group against another. At this time, it was subsistence farming, that is, you just grew enough to feed your family. The manorial system comes into play. The feudalism era is developed. Basically, if you were a serf, you worked for the strong man or in that particular location. Serfs were not slaves, but they certainly were tied to the land. Serfs were given protection by the lords. In turn, the serfs would give parts of their crops and also their labor to the lord for this protection. So it was based on a mutual cooperation. This picture shows life in the medieval manner. People working outside the castle walls, living out there, their lives there. In times of trouble, they would retreat inside the walls for protection. This shows how the hierarchy, the matrix, worked. King at the top, then you had vassals under them, knights under the vassals, and then the peasants, and each swearing loyalty to the folks above. So it was a cooperative system based on a person's word. You would swear feelings to those above you. In exchange, you would be given land to rule. The fief was the land given by the lord in return for the vassal or the knight's loyal service. The serfs worked the land. They were expected to give a tithe not only to the church but also they were to pay taxes to the Lord. Corvée was a condition of unpaid labor by which the serfs would commit to maintaining roads and ditches, things that need to be done around the castle. It shows a picture of how things worked in terms of soldiers and knights and people working within this system. And it was a closed system for the most part, each swearing allegiance to the other for their own motives. This shows a construction of the pyramid of power. It was all about land and loyalty. And if you were at the bottom of the pile, that's where the work was done. Serfs could not be sold as slaves, but they certainly tied to the land. They could retain ownership as long as they lived up to their end of the bargain, obligations, and property could be passed from father to son. Few serfs ever escaped this arrangement. No social promotion. If you were born a serf, you were most likely going to die a serf. Most of these manorial systems, people didn't travel too much. There wasn't much trade. There wasn't much exchange of ideas. The groups that did travel somewhat were the monks, the missionaries, people going from different abbeys, different monks, different places where the church controlled the land. In fact, about a third of the land was controlled by the church. And you can see here how feudalism worked. King at the top, peasants at the bottom. This shows a diagram of a typical castle, a strong point to defend yourself from other groups near you. And the peasants would file into these castles for protection. This shows a diagram of how the land was worked. And of course the castle being the most prominent thing within the location. And this is how you became a knight. You worked as a page and then a squire and then a knight. Code of honor and behavior. People were expected to be loyal to those in above. There was a certain way you were supposed to go about your business. And so that was what was expected. Here shows the manor and a diagram of some of the farms in the surrounding area. This is where the wealth was created. The Christian church was a valuable or important component in this western part of Europe. The Pope was the patriarch. He was the head of the church. There were archbishops and bishops and cardinals and monasteries all under his control. They kept other religions out, which they called heresies. For instance, Islam and some of those religions, paganism, mostly by force, and they depended on the ruling class to enforce these laws. Of course, we know that the Eastern Orthodox in Constantinople and the Catholic Church in Rome had the split, and they will go their separate ways. Monasticism basically dealt with the church being the place of learning. If you were a wealthy lord, you would send your child to one of these monasteries to receive an education. They were also served as hospitals and refuge in times of war. Many people escaped into Christianity, into the Catholic Church as a way to escape some of the hardships that they endured. They also were important centers of learning. Libraries were created, copying of books. Scriptura, that is just copying one manuscript to another, and these were done by the monks, and these would also be illustrated. And the bishops and the abbeys, again, were part of the feudal system. They legitimized the king, the knights, and in turn, for their legitimacy, they were protected. At times, they could curb warfare. They gave an edict that only 40 days a year for combat. Only certain days of the week you could fight. They certainly were behind the Crusades and the Inquisition, that is, rooting out heresy and killing those who opposed the Catholic Church. They were given a tithe by the church, or by the people, by the lords, depending on what station in life you happen to be at. Peter's pence was 1 penny per person, paid by the peasants. The church was granted favor. Kings and Roman emperors tapped into the church for people who were educated to help run the kingdom. And so sort of a symbiotic relationship, each mutually depending on the other and benefiting from each other's position. This shows a medieval monastery scriptorum, that is, copying the manuscripts and illustrating them. Not too much advancement in knowledge, it was just more or less preservation of what had already been accumulated. This shows a typical day of a monk in a medieval period. Sleeping, church service, eating, reading, work, all regimented. And then we will come to Charlemagne and his successors. In the 8th century, Charlemagne will come to power right at the end of the 8th century, the 900s or 800s. Charles Martel, or Charles the Hammer, was responsible for stopping the Muslims at the Battle of Tours in 732 CE. And Charlemagne will come from this. The Carolingians was the family that he will come from. And he will set about restoring what was called the Holy Roman Empire. And he will be very successful. He will rule for about 50 years. He tried to restore the church, and he promoted intellectual activity, but it was pretty much a slow go. The Pope recognized Charlemagne as the emperor over the vast territory, which legitimized his rule. On his death, the kingdom was divided among his grandsons. Under Charlemagne, some of the social cultural reforms did establish some schools and libraries, appointed scholars such as Alcuin, who later will develop places of learning for monks and the upper crust, revised art, and certainly tried to spread the Christian church. This shows Charlemagne's exploration, or his expansion, during his reign, and you can see that he ruled a sizable portion of Eastern or Western Europe. And he will temporarily revive the empire, but eventually it will fall back to the way it was. This shows Charlemagne being crowned by the Pope, legitimizing his rule. And this is Charlemagne being crowned by Leo III. This shows a picture of, again, Charlemagne's empire. Decline of Charlemagne's empire after his death. His kingdom will be fragmented, and it will dissolve. Then we'll move on to William the Conqueror, and we'll stop right there.